I'm Cindy, 35 years old, and I gave 15 years of my life to Horizon Pharmaceuticals. I built my career there from entry-level researcher to leading our most promising drug delivery project. When my VP Richard demanded I cut safety protocols to rush our breakthrough to market, I refused. "If you're not comfortable with our new direction, the door is right there," he smirked, firing me after 15 years of dedication. What he didn't know was that I'd already secured the patent for my technology, now valued at $3.5 billion. If you're watching this from your office wondering if your loyalty is being taken for granted, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me show you how standing by your principles can lead to the biggest comeback of your life. I grew up in a modest two-bedroom apartment in South Boston, the daughter of a high school chemistry teacher and a nurse. Science wasn't just a subject in our household, it was a way of life. My father turned our tiny kitchen into a lab on weekends, showing me how everyday substances could create fascinating reactions. My mother would bring home stories about patients whose lives were transformed by modern medicine, but also those who suffered terrible side effects from the very drugs meant to heal them. By 16, I had mapped out my future. I would become a biomedical engineer and develop medications that helped without harming. Getting there wasn't easy. My parents had saved some money for my education, but not nearly enough for the prestigious biomedical program at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I took out substantial student loans and worked 20 hours weekly at the university lab washing equipment just to make ends meet. Those late nights balancing organic chemistry homework with minimum wage lab duties taught me persistence. While other students complained about workload, I saw every challenge as preparation for the career I desperately wanted. My professors noticed this drive. Dr. Franklin, my pharmaceutical design professor, became a mentor and recommended me for a competitive summer internship at Horizon Pharmaceuticals. That summer changed everything. Horizon was developing treatments for autoimmune diseases, and I was assigned to assist with testing compound stability. My supervisor, impressed by my attention to detail, allowed me to propose a minor modification to their preservation process. The change was small but significant, extending shelf life by 14% without additional preservatives. When the internship ended, the lab director offered me a permanent position upon graduation. I remember calling my parents, tears streaming down my face. "I did it," I told them. "Horizon wants me as a junior researcher." My first 5 years at Horizon were exactly what I had dreamed of. I worked alongside brilliant minds, gradually earning my place on increasingly important projects. Sarah Mitchell, the senior researcher who took me under her wing, taught me not just technical skills, but how to navigate corporate politics. "Always document everything," she advised one evening as we calibrated equipment. "Your work is only as valuable as your ability to prove it's yours." Then there was David Parker, who joined the company 2 years after me. We became lab partners on a project reformulating an arthritis medication to reduce liver impact. David's computational models complemented my experimental approach, and together we reduced hepatic side effects by 32%. Our success caught the attention of Richard Barnes, the newly appointed Vice President of Research and Development. He was charismatic, sharply dressed, and seemed genuinely interested in innovation. During my first presentation to the executive team, Richard stopped me afterward. "Cindy, that modification approach is exactly the kind of thinking we need here. Keep pushing boundaries." His approval felt validating. When he began stopping by the lab more frequently, asking detailed questions about my methodologies, I was flattered. Sarah seemed less impressed. "Just make sure you're keeping detailed records," she reminded me, a curious expression crossing her face. At 27, I made my first significant breakthrough. I developed a modified protein binding technique that allowed certain compounds to cross the blood-brain barrier more efficiently. Richard personally recommended my promotion to lead researcher and doubled my project budget. William Johnson, our CEO, congratulated me at the company holiday party, though it was clear Richard had his complete trust and ear. "Richard tells me you're the future of Horizon," William said briefly, shaking my hand before moving on to other executives. Over the next few years, the company culture subtly shifted. quarterly targets became the primary focus of all hands meetings. Research timelines shortened. The phrase regulatory fast track appeared in more internal memos. Richard's influence grew as he delivered the accelerated results William wanted, and anyone who couldn't keep pace found themselves marginalized or managed out. Still, I believed in what we were doing. My team was making genuine progress, and I thought Richard's ambition was pushing us toward better treatments for patients. I couldn't have been more wrong. The idea came to me during a medical conference in San Diego. A neurologist presented a case where a patient couldn't tolerate the side effects of an effective treatment, ultimately choosing to discontinue medication and accept disease progression instead. It struck a personal chord. My grandmother had experienced the same impossible choice with her heart medication years earlier. On the flight back to Boston, I sketched a concept on a napkin. What if medication could be targeted to specific tissues using microscopic carriers? Not just general targeting like existing technologies, but precision delivery using a proprietary polymer coating that would respond only to specific cellular environments. I called it Nano-Carrier Technology, though that was simplified for non-technical discussions. The technical name filled half a page with chemical terminology. The concept was elegant but enormously complex to implement. If it worked, medications could be delivered precisely where needed without affecting surrounding tissues, reducing side effects by potentially 90% or more. Back at Horizon, I requested a small budget to explore the concept. Richard approved it with surprising enthusiasm, but suggested I keep it quiet until we have something concrete to show William. This seemed reasonable. Failed projects could damage department funding. For 6 months, I practically lived in the lab. My relationship with Tom, my boyfriend of 3 years, deteriorated as I canceled plans repeatedly. The lab isn't going anywhere, Cindy. He complained during our last argument before he moved out. But I couldn't stop. This wasn't just a project. It was the culmination of everything I'd worked toward. David noticed my exhaustion one morning at 4 a.m., when he came in early and found me still there from the previous day. "You need to sleep," he insisted, bringing me coffee anyway. "Just one more simulation," I replied, showing him preliminary data from our rat models. The targeted delivery system had reduced kidney exposure by 78% while maintaining therapeutic levels at the intended site. "This is remarkable," David whispered, fully awake now. "Have you shown Sarah?" Sarah was equally impressed but more measured in her response. "Document everything, date every page and make copies," she advised, an unusual intensity in her voice. When I asked why she seemed concerned, she simply said, 15 years at Horizon has taught me caution." 2 weeks later came the eureka moment. After countless failures, the polymer coating successfully bonded with our test compound and demonstrated selective release in the target tissue environment. The lab erupted in celebration. Even the usually reserved laboratory technicians joined in understanding that we were witnessing something revolutionary. My team of 5 researchers worked feverishly to gather comprehensive data. Early results showed a 93% reduction in off-target tissue exposure while maintaining 100% therapeutic efficacy. These weren't just improvements, they were transformative numbers that could fundamentally change medication safety profiles. Richard's interest in my project suddenly intensified. He began requesting daily updates and suggested moving additional researchers to accelerate development. While the support was welcome, something felt off about his sudden micromanagement. During one update meeting, Richard's questions shifted from scientific concerns to commercial applications before we'd even completed safety profiling. "How quickly can we prepare for human trials?" he asked, scrolling through presentation slides that should have concerned him more. "We're at least 6 months from that point," I explained. "We need complete toxicology studies and mechanism verification across multiple tissue types." Richard frowned. "Horizon isn't a university lab, Cindy. We have shareholders expecting returns. Find ways to compress that timeline." I shared my concerns with the research team that afternoon. Most nodded in silent agreement. But nobody spoke up. Sarah pulled me aside afterward. "Be careful," she warned. Richard has a reputation for taking promising projects across the finish line by any means necessary and taking credit in the process. That evening, I discovered Richard had scheduled meetings with the marketing department to discuss the technology without including me or anyone from my research team. When I casually mentioned it to William's assistant, hoping for a meeting with the CEO, she smiled apologetically. All research discussions need to go through Richard first. Company policy. Later that week, David suggested something that initially seemed paranoid. You should consider filing a personal patent application, he said quietly during lunch. That would violate my employment contract, I replied. Not if you develop significant components on your own time, he countered. Have you? I had. Many core concepts had come during evenings, weekends, and that initial flight from San Diego. I'd used personal resources to research outside the lab, but it still felt wrong somehow. The following Monday, I noticed something disturbing: detailed research notes missing from my desk drawer. Nothing else was touched, but pages documenting my earliest independent work on the Nano-Carrier concept were gone. I searched everywhere, assuming I had misplaced them, but found nothing. That night, I purchased a small camera and concealed it on my bookshelf, angled toward my desk. 3 days later, reviewing footage during lunch, I watched in disbelief as Richard entered my office at 7:30 a.m. before anyone arrived and methodically searched my files. My hands trembled as I watched him photograph pages with his phone before carefully replacing them exactly as he'd found them. I felt sick. The mentor who had championed my career was systematically gathering information for reasons I couldn't yet understand, but which filled me with dread. The quarterly board meeting was approaching, and pressure mounted throughout the research division. Horizon had promised breakthrough announcements to shareholders after 2 consecutive quarters of declining revenue. Department heads scrambled to produce results that could boost investor confidence. Richard called an emergency division meeting 3 weeks before the board presentation. We need something significant to announce, he stated bluntly. Cindy's Nano-Carrier Technology is our best option. Marketing needs material by Friday. But we haven't completed foundational safety testing, I objected. We can't make claims about human applications yet. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. We're not claiming it's ready for market. We're announcing a promising technology in development. The distinction matters to legal, if not to science. The room fell uncomfortably silent. I noticed colleagues avoiding eye contact with me. Had I become the difficult one, the unreasonable perfectionist, holding up progress? Later that day, Sarah found me in the lab calibrating equipment with unnecessary precision, something I did when anxious. You're right to be concerned, she said, checking that we were alone. Richard did this with the Thompson immunotherapy project last year. Announced prematurely, took control, pushed it through with minimal testing. 3 patients in the trial developed severe autoimmune reactions. How did I not hear about this? I asked. Settlements with aggressive NDAs, she replied grimly. The researchers who objected were restructured out within months. The following day, I discovered Richard had scheduled meetings with marketing to discuss positioning strategy for the technology before we'd even completed preliminary animal trials. When I confronted him, he waved away my concerns. That's why we have a legal department, Cindy, he said dismissively. They'll ensure we don't overstep regulatory boundaries. Your job is the science, let others handle business strategy. My isolation grew as colleagues began avoiding lunch invitations and changing topics when I approached. David remained supportive but increasingly cautious about being seen in extended conversation with me. People are worried about job security, he explained. The research budget is being reevaluated next quarter. I made 3 attempts to meet with William, our CEO, but his assistant politely rebuffed each one. Richard handles all research division matters, she repeated with increasing firmness. After finding another set of notes missing, I worked late one evening, backing up critical research components to my personal laptop documentation of independent work, done on my own time, original concepts, predating company resources, evidence of my sole intellectual contribution to key elements. This wasn't company property, it was my insurance policy. David stopped by at 9 p.m. on his way out. Seeing my exhaustion, he closed the door. "You should consider protecting yourself legally," he advised quietly. "I've seen Richard take over promising projects before. Once he has control, researchers become dispensable." "I've given 15 years to Horizon," I replied. "Surely that counts for something." David's expression was sympathetic but resolute. "Corporations have no loyalty, Cindy, only interests." That night, reviewing security footage from my hidden camera, I discovered something worse than Richard browsing my files. He had accessed my computer, inserted a USB drive, and copied numerous folders. My heart raced as I recognized the directories containing my most innovative work. I slept poorly, waking repeatedly with a sense of impending disaster. The next morning confirmed my fears. Walking past the conference room, I glimpsed Richard presenting my technology to the executive team without me. Through the glass, I saw my diagrams, my data, my life's work displayed on slides bearing his name as division head. When confronted that afternoon, Richard seemed genuinely confused by my anger. "This is company research, Cindy. We're all on the same team here." "Then why wasn't I invited to the presentation I demanded?" "It was preliminary, just getting the executives comfortable with the concept before the board meeting," he explained smoothly. "You'll obviously lead the technical portion when we present to the board." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe 15 years of dedication meant something. But that evening, receiving the board meeting agenda via email, my suspicion was confirmed. Richard was listed as the sole presenter for the Nano-Carrier Technology. My name appeared nowhere in the document. The board meeting was held in Horizon's top-floor conference room, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. I arrived early, nervously adjusting my presentation materials, though I wasn't scheduled to speak. William greeted board members warmly, while Richard moved confidently among them, shaking hands and sharing jokes with people who controlled billions in capital investment. When the meeting began, William introduced Richard glowingly. "The future of Horizon Pharmaceuticals is being shaped by visionary leadership in our research division. Richard will present a revolutionary technology poised to transform drug delivery." Richard stepped to the podium immaculately dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. His presentation slides appeared on the massive screen, my diagrams, my research, my innovation, all presented under the banner of Horizon's Next Generation Technology Initiative. "Our team has developed a proprietary nano-carrier system." Richard began using the exact terminology I had created. "This technology will reduce medication side effects by targeting specific tissues, while avoiding exposure to non-target organs." For 45 minutes, Richard presented my work as though he intimately understood every aspect of its development. He showed my data, using my analytical frameworks, without once mentioning my name or acknowledging my team's contribution. Most disturbing was his timeline for human trials: 3 months, a dangerously accelerated schedule that would require skipping critical safety protocols. When he opened for questions, I couldn't remain silent any longer. I raised my hand, and Richard, perhaps not expecting my participation, acknowledged me before recognizing his mistake. "I have concerns about the proposed timeline," I stated, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "The safety profile isn't complete. Rushing to human trials without thorough tissue cross-reactivity testing poses significant risks." The room fell silent. Richard's smile tightened. "Thank you for your input, Cindy," he replied smoothly. "Rest assured, our safety protocols exceed FDA requirements." "But the protocols described would skip organ-specific accumulation studies," I persisted. "The whole point of this technology is tissue specificity. Without comprehensive testing across all major organ systems, we can't guarantee safety." An older board member leaned forward. "Is there disagreement within the research team about readiness?" Richard intervened before I could answer. "Cindy represents the admirably cautious academic perspective. However, our regulatory experts have confirmed we can proceed with parallel safety studies during initial human trials under compassionate use provisions." This was not only misleading but potentially dangerous. I couldn't let it stand. That's simply not accurate, I stated firmly. The polymer binding mechanism requires complete metabolic pathway verification before human exposure. Anything less would be ethically questionable and potentially harmful. Richard's expression hardened. Perhaps we should discuss methodological disagreements after the board meeting, Cindy. This isn't the appropriate forum for technical debates. William shifted uncomfortably. Let's move on to financial projections. The remainder of the meeting passed in a blur of anger and disbelief. Richard presented market projections showing billions in potential revenue, emphasizing first-mover advantage and the need for speed. When the meeting concluded, board members filed out discussing investment opportunities, completely unaware of the safety compromises being proposed. Richard caught my arm as I gathered my materials. My office. Now. His voice was low, but unmistakably threatening. Inside his expansive corner office with the door firmly closed, Richard's professional veneer vanished. What the hell was that, he demanded. You directly contradicted me in front of the board. You're proposing a dangerous timeline that violates basic safety protocols, I replied. And you presented my research as if I barely existed. Your research, Richard laughed incredulously. You conducted that research as a Horizon employee, using Horizon resources for Horizon objectives. It belongs to this company, and this company has determined it's ready to move forward. Moving forward is one thing. Skipping critical safety studies is another. Richard paced behind his desk. The pharmaceutical landscape has changed, Cindy. While researchers like you perfect formulas in labs, our competitors are racing products to market. Every month of delay costs millions in potential revenue. And rushing could cost patients their lives, I countered. He stopped pacing and leaned across the desk. This isn't about patience. It's about your ego and inability to see the bigger picture. You're not the brilliant lone scientist you imagine yourself to be. You're one component in a corporate machine with objectives beyond your narrow technical concerns. The conversation escalated, his voice rising, while mine remained deliberately controlled. I detailed specific safety concerns. He dismissed each with vague assurances about regulatory compliance. I referenced industry standards. He cited competitive pressures and shareholder expectations. Finally, Richard straightened and adjusted his tie. This conversation is pointless. You've made your position clear, as have I. If you're not comfortable with our new direction, the door is right there. He gestured dismissively toward the exit. Are you firing me? I asked, scarcely believing it had come to this after 15 years. I'm giving you an opportunity to recognize reality, he replied coldly. Either align with company priorities or pursue your excessive caution elsewhere. Your choice. In that moment, something crystallized within me. Years of dedication, nights and weekends, sacrificed relationships, neglected all for a company that would discard safety protocols and ethical considerations for quarterly profits. I choose patience over profits, I stated, closing my laptop with quiet dignity. I always will. Richard's expression shifted to something resembling pity. Then you've chosen career suicide. Security will escort you out. Company policy for terminated employees. The walk through Horizon's corridors, flanked by 2 security guards, was humiliating. Colleagues watched wide-eyed as I carried my personal belongings in a cardboard box. 15 years reduced to a few photos, coffee mugs, and desk plants. They had locked me out of the computer system before I reached the lobby. The drive home was a blur of competing emotions: rage, grief, fear, and beneath it all, a strange sense of relief. For years, I had compromised small principles to advance important work. Where had the line blurred between necessary compromise and dangerous concession? At midnight, sitting in my darkened apartment, surrounded by the remnants of my career, I remembered my personal laptop. Opening it revealed the backup files I'd made, detailed documentation of my independent work on the Nano-Carrier Technology, including the original concept developed on my own time, preliminary calculations done on weekends, crucial innovations conceived outside company resources. In that moment, I realized Richard had made a catastrophic miscalculation. He had taken my research but overlooked my most powerful asset proof of independent development. As the clock struck 1 a.m., I began composing an email to Patricia Reynolds, a patent attorney I had befriended during our college days. Patricia's law office overlooked the Charles River, its wood-paneled walls lined with degrees and bar admissions. She greeted me with concern, having cleared her morning schedule after my urgent message. "You look terrible," she observed, pouring coffee. "When did you last sleep?" "That's not important right now," I replied, connecting my laptop to her office system. "I need you to see this." For 2 hours, I walked Patricia through my documentation date-stamped concept sketches, predating my work at Horizon Weekend calculations, performed on my personal computer journal entries, documenting independent breakthroughs, and most importantly, the original polymer formula conceived during off hours. The employment contract specifies that work created using company resources belongs to Horizon. Patricia noted, reviewing my employment documents. But independent innovations, particularly those conceived on personal time without company resources, exist in a gray area, especially if they represent the essential novel component. The polymer coating formulation is the core innovation, I explained. Without it, the delivery system doesn't work. I developed that specific chemistry sequence at home after my grandmother's funeral, motivated by her experience with medication side effects. Patricia nodded slowly. That personal motivation strengthens your case. But we need to move extremely quickly. Once Horizon files patents, challenging them becomes exponentially more difficult. We worked through the night preparing an emergency patent application focused specifically on the novel polymer coating technology. By 3 a.m., bleary-eyed, but determined, we submitted the application with expedited processing request. Patricia warned me this was just the beginning. "Horizon will fight this aggressively," she cautioned. "They have tremendous resources and an army of attorneys. Are you prepared for that battle?" I thought about the patients who needed safer medications, about 15 years of work nearly co-opted, about Richard's dismissive smirk when he fired me. "Absolutely," I answered. The following week passed in a strange limbo. I ignored calls from former colleagues curious about my departure. Instead, I researched pharmaceutical companies with strong ethical reputations and track records, prioritizing safety. 3 emerged as potential partners: Integrity Pharmaceuticals, Biogen Health, and Novatech Medicines. I also sent an anonymous tip to the FDA, outlining concerns about Horizon's testing protocols and planned accelerated timeline. This wasn't about revenge. Patients' lives were potentially at risk if Richard's plan proceeded. 8 days after my termination, Horizon held a press conference. On my television screen, Richard stood confidently beside William, announcing a groundbreaking drug delivery technology developed by Horizon's research division. The company's stock jumped 16% by closing bell. The next morning, my email pinged with notification: patent application. The patent office had recognized the unique innovation in my polymer coating technology and granted expedited approval based on its medical significance. I forwarded the notification to Patricia with a single word: now. Within minutes, my phone exploded with notifications. First came a voicemail from Horizon's legal department requesting an urgent discussion regarding intellectual property matters. Then a text from David: "What did you do? Richard is losing it." By noon, I had 27 missed calls from various Horizon numbers. By the following morning, the count exceeded 99. News of my patent had reached the company, and panic was setting in. Rather than responding, I proceeded with meetings Patricia had arranged with 3 competing pharmaceutical companies. Each expressed serious interest in the technology, particularly after reviewing preliminary safety data I had compiled before my termination. The meeting with Integrity Pharmaceuticals proved most promising. Their chief scientific officer, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, immediately grasped both the technical innovation and its patient safety implications. "Your insistence on thorough safety profiling before human trials aligns perfectly with our development philosophy," she noted. "We'd rather be second to market with a safe product than first with one that harms patients." After extensive discussion of development pathways, Integrity offered a partnership full funding for development, a leadership position for me in the project, comprehensive safety studies before human trials, and a significant percentage of future revenue. As I signed the preliminary agreement with Integrity, financial news channels reported a troubling development for Horizon. Their stock had plummeted 24% following uncertainty regarding ownership of a recently announced drug delivery technology. That evening, an unexpected name appeared on my caller ID, William Johnson, Horizon's CEO. Against Patricia's advice, I answered. "This has gotten out of hand, Cindy," he began without preamble. "Richard didn't fully explain your contribution to the project. We should discuss how to move forward cooperatively." "I'm represented by counsel now," I replied calmly. "All discussions should include my attorney. Before we escalate to legal battles, I'm authorized to offer reinstatement as head of research, with a substantial compensation increase and full project control." The offer was tempting for approximately 3 seconds until I remembered the board meeting the security escort 15 years dismissed without consideration. "I've signed with Integrity Pharmaceuticals," I informed him. "They've committed to proper safety protocols and ethical development." William's tone changed instantly. "Then you leave us no choice but to pursue legal remedies for theft of company intellectual property. I look forward to discussing my independent development documentation in court," I replied before ending the call. The following week, Horizon Pharmaceuticals filed suit against me for intellectual property theft, breach of contract, and corporate espionage. Their press release painted me as a disgruntled employee who stole company research after being legitimately terminated for performance issues. Former colleagues avoided me completely, now fearing association might jeopardize their positions. Only Sarah and David maintained contact, providing moral support and occasionally useful information about Horizon's internal response. Through David, I learned Richard had assigned a team to reconstruct my research, only to discover critical components missing from company records because they had never been there in the first place. Meanwhile, meetings with Integrity progressed rapidly. We assembled a research team including some of the industry's most respected safety profile experts. Initial funding was secured for an 18-month development timeline, longer than Richard had proposed, but appropriate for thorough safety verification. As Horizon's lawsuit moved into discovery phase, their aggressive posture abruptly shifted. Patricia called one evening, barely containing her excitement. "Their attorneys have requested a settlement conference," she reported. "Something in the evidence we submitted has them spooked." That something became clear during depositions. Richard's emails revealed explicit instructions to accelerate timeline regardless of standard protocols and to secure all aspects of Cindy's research before addressing ongoing employment. Most damaging was his direct statement to William. "We can replicate her work without the complications of her excessive caution. Termination recommended." These communications directly contradicted Horizon's public claims and suggested premeditated misappropriation of my research. The FDA investigation triggered by my anonymous tip added further pressure, with agency officials now scrutinizing Horizon's testing protocols across multiple projects. Just as the case appeared headed for trial, William contacted me directly once more. "This situation has become untenable," he admitted. "Richard's actions were not sanctioned as described in the evidence. We're prepared to offer a substantial settlement and withdraw all claims." "My priority isn't money," I responded. "It's ensuring the technology is developed safely." The ensuing negotiation focused primarily on this principle. In exchange for dismissing counterclaims, Horizon acknowledged my patent ownership, agreed to stringent FDA oversight of their ongoing projects, and established an independent safety review board for future trials. Financial terms remained significant but secondary to these ethical safeguards. The day after settlement terms were finalized, William announced Richard's resignation to pursue other opportunities. Industry insiders recognized the language as corporate speak for termination due to misconduct. That same afternoon, Rebecca Martinez called with news that would change my life. "The board has reviewed your work and partnership contribution. We'd like to offer you position as Chief Science Officer for our new Targeted Therapeutics Division. After 15 years pursuing safer medications for patients, I finally had the platform, resources, and ethical alignment to make it happen. The lawsuit filed by Horizon dominated the next 6 months of my life. Their initial filing painted a damning picture. I was characterized as a vindictive employee who had stolen proprietary research after being terminated for legitimate performance concerns. They demanded immediate injunctive relief, prohibiting me from using or developing their technology, plus damages exceeding $50 million. Patricia was unimpressed by their allegations. Standard intimidation tactics, she observed, reviewing their complaint. They're hoping you'll cave under pressure before discovery reveals the truth. My days developed a surreal rhythm: mornings at Integrity, working with our growing research team; afternoons with Patricia, preparing legal responses; evenings reviewing documents for disclosure requirements. Sleep became a luxury I rarely enjoyed. Media coverage painted me as David facing corporate Goliath. The Boston Globe ran a feature titled "Battle for Billion-Dollar Breakthrough, Fired Researcher Claims Independent Discovery." Most reports portrayed me as taking on impossible odds against Horizon's legal arsenal. The isolation was perhaps hardest to bear. Former colleagues avoided me entirely, fearing association might jeopardize their positions. LinkedIn connections disappeared overnight. 15 years of professional relationships vanished within weeks. Only Sarah and David maintained contact, though carefully, and away from company premises. "Richard has forbidden anyone from mentioning your name," Sarah reported during a clandestine coffee meeting. "He tells everyone you're attempting to steal company research and will fail spectacularly." Discovery changed everything. Patricia's legal team methodically dismantled Horizon's claims through document requests and depositions. Richard's emails revealed explicit instructions to appropriate my research before terminating my employment. His messages to William included damning statements like, "Once we secure the core technology documentation, we can accelerate development without Cindy's excessive caution slowing progress." Most devastating was evidence that Richard had systematically accessed my files and copied data prior to any performance concerns being documented. The timeline clearly showed premeditated misappropriation rather than legitimate termination. The FDA investigation triggered by my anonymous tip added mounting pressure. Agency officials, now scrutinizing all of Horizon's testing protocols, discovered concerning patterns of accelerated timelines and abbreviated safety studies across multiple projects. During Richard's deposition, his carefully constructed narrative unraveled under Patricia's precise questioning. "Patricia, did you inform Cindy that her performance was unsatisfactory prior to termination?" Richard: "Her excessive caution was well known." "Patricia, please answer the question. Was any performance concern documented before you accessed her research files without authorization?" Richard: "Documentation isn't always necessary for performance issues." Patricia: "So that's a no. When did you first consider terminating her employment?" Richard's response after consulting his attorney: "I don't recall specifically." Patricia then produced an email Richard had sent to William 3 months earlier. "Once we secure complete documentation of the Nano-Carrier system, we should consider restructuring Cindy's role. Her safety concerns will impede commercialization timelines." The deposition continued for 6 grueling hours, with Richard's testimony increasingly contradicting documented evidence. By the end, even Horizon's attorneys appeared concerned by their clients' inconsistencies. Meanwhile, work at Integrity progressed rapidly. Our team expanded to include renowned safety specialists and drug delivery experts, attracted by our commitment to thorough development. Early laboratory results confirmed my technology's unprecedented specificity, with targeted delivery achieving 97% accuracy in animal models, far exceeding industry standards. As the legal proceedings entered their 4th month, William Johnson requested a private meeting. Patricia advised against it, but I agreed with specific conditions: neutral location, attorneys present, and full documentation. We met in a conference room at Patricia's law firm. William appeared without Richard, the first indication something had shifted. This situation has escalated beyond reason. William began looking genuinely tired. The evidence presented during discovery suggests actions were taken without board knowledge or approval. You mean, Richard stole my research and planned my termination to commercialize it without proper safety studies? I clarified. William winced but didn't contradict me. The board has authorized me to propose settlement terms. We're prepared to acknowledge your patent ownership and offer substantial compensation for damages. My priority isn't money, I responded firmly. It's ensuring patient safety isn't compromised for profit margins. The ensuing negotiation focused primarily on this principle. Final settlement terms included Horizon's acknowledgement of my patent ownership, implementation of enhanced safety protocols for all developmental products, establishment of an independent review board for clinical trials, and yes, significant financial compensation reflecting the technology's $3.5 billion valuation. Industry news outlets reported the settlement with varying interpretations, but the Securities Exchange Commission filing told the true story. Horizon had capitulated entirely, acknowledging my ownership and the legitimacy of my independent point development. The day after settlement finalization, William announced Richard's departure in carefully worded corporate language that industry insiders immediately recognized as termination for cause. Richard's reputation collapsed as details leaked. No major pharmaceutical company would touch him after evidence of his ethical compromises emerged. That same week, Rebecca Martinez called me into her office at Integrity. The board has reviewed your contributions and leadership through this ordeal. We'd like to offer you position as Chief Executive Officer of our new Targeted Therapeutics division with full autonomy over development protocols and timelines. After 15 years pursuing safer medications for patients, I finally had the platform, resources, and ethical alignment to make it happen. My technology, developed from personal experience and dedication to patient safety, would now benefit countless lives without compromise. The patent, officially valued at $3.5 billion, was revolutionary, not just in its science, but in its development approach, proving that ethical pharmaceutical development could coexist with commercial success when patient well-being remained the priority. 1 year after the settlement, I stood in Integrity Pharmaceuticals' newly constructed research facility, addressing our expanded team of 78 scientists and researchers. Behind me, a wall of windows overlooked the Cambridge Innovation District, where I had begun my career 15 years earlier. Today marks a milestone, I announced, unable to contain my smile. The FDA has approved our Phase 2 clinical trials for the Nano-Carrier insulin delivery system with 0 safety modifications requested. Their review specifically commended our comprehensive tissue specificity documentation. The room erupted in applause. Our first application of the technology, targeting insulin delivery to reduce cardiovascular side effects, had progressed methodically through development. Where Richard would have rushed to human trials within 3 months, we had taken 14, and the resulting safety profile was impeccable. Early patient testimonials from Phase 1 trials were displayed on the screen behind me. Julia, a 57-year-old diabetes patient who had stopped insulin due to side effects, reported, "For the first time in 8 years, I can manage my blood sugar without chest pain." Michael, a 34-year-old who had suffered liver complications from traditional insulin, wrote, "This treatment gave me my life back." These weren't just clinical outcomes. They were vindications of every principle I had refused to compromise. After the meeting, I walked through the laboratory spaces where our team was applying the Nano-Carrier technology to 7 additional medications. Sarah had joined us 6 months earlier as head of safety profiling after growing increasingly uncomfortable with Horizon's accelerated protocols. David had come aboard more recently to lead computational modeling. Together we were building something revolutionary, not just in science, but in approach. Remember when we used to sneak conversations in the Horizon stairwell? Sarah asked as we reviewed liver function results that showed 94% reduction in hepatic exposure. I remember thinking I was being paranoid, I admitted. Turns out not paranoid enough. my assistant interrupted with news that our recruitment team had successfully hired 4 scientists from Horizon's increasingly depleted research division. Since Richard's departure and the settlement, Horizon stock had fallen 42%. Their attempts to develop competing technologies had failed without access to my core innovation. That evening, attending an industry conference, I encountered a surreal sight. Richard Barnes, standing alone by the refreshment table, his once immaculate suit, slightly rumpled conference badge, identifying him as a pharmaceutical consultant rather than a corporate executive. He noticed me before I could retreat. For a moment, something like shame crossed his features before his expression hardened. "Enjoying your victory tour?" he asked, bitterness evident. I considered several responses highlighting his ethical failures, noting Horizon's declining value, or simply walking away. Instead, I asked the question that had haunted me for a year. Why didn't you just develop it properly? We could have helped countless patients without compromising safety. "Markets don't reward caution," he replied, swirling his drink. "If we hadn't moved quickly, someone else would have. And yet we're succeeding specifically because of our thorough approach," I noted. "Physicians trust our data precisely because we didn't take shortcuts." Richard laughed without humor. "A rare exception. This industry rewards speed, not scruples." "Perhaps it's time that changed," I suggested, walking away from the man who had nearly destroyed my career but ultimately catalyzed its greatest achievement. Back at Integrity, we implemented what I called the Ethical Innovation Framework, a development approach that integrated rigorous safety protocols with commercial timelines. Rather than viewing safety and profit as competing interests, we demonstrated how they reinforced each other. Physician confidence in our thorough testing translated to higher prescription rates and patient compliance. I established a mentoring program for young scientists, emphasizing documentation practices and ethical boundaries. "Your brilliance belongs to you," I told each cohort. "Protect it while using it to improve lives." The healing process wasn't immediate or linear. I experienced moments of anger, recalling the humiliation of being escorted from Horizon nights, questioning whether the fight had been worth the toll days, wondering if Richard had irreparably damaged my professional reputation. Yet each clinical success reinforced that standing by principles, however painful in the moment, had ultimately served both my career and patients. The technology that Richard had tried to rush to market was now helping people safely, effectively, and with physician confidence that would have been impossible under his timeline. During a board meeting at Integrity, William Johnson's name appeared unexpectedly in a competitive analysis report. He had stepped down as Horizon's CEO, accepting responsibility for oversight failures in the research division. He called last week, Rebecca mentioned after the meeting. "He's looking for advisory positions in the industry." "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That our ethics standards are non-negotiable," she replied, with a knowing smile. 18 months after settlement, when our first product received full FDA approval with unprecedented safety ratings, I found myself reflecting on the journey. While watching Boston Harbor from my office, the same view I'd had during that fateful board meeting at Horizon, but from a different building and a transformed perspective. The patent that Richard had dismissed as unnecessarily cautious was now valued at $3.5 billion, specifically because of its comprehensive safety profile. The approach he had mocked as academic perfectionism had become industry-leading innovation. The principles I refused to compromise had ultimately created more value than any accelerated timeline could have produced. True innovation, I realize, requires both brilliance and ethics. Genius without responsibility is not just dangerous but ultimately self-defeating. Patient trust once lost is nearly impossible to regain. But when earned through genuine commitment to safety, it becomes the most valuable asset in healthcare. If you've stayed with me through this story, perhaps you're facing your own ethical crossroads, a moment when standing by principles seems costly or naive. Remember that integrity isn't just morally right. In the long run, it's strategically advantageous. What values would you refuse to compromise even if it meant starting over? Have you ever had to choose between career advancement and personal ethics? Share your experience in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if this story resonated with you. Sometimes the door that closes leads to building something far greater than you could have imagined. Thank you for listening. And remember, in the battle between expediency and ethics, choosing ethics may take longer, but creates something that truly lasts.